Leadership isn't about a position. It's not about a role. It's really about the heart of the individual. Do I see potential in something? And do I believe I have the courage to help develop that potential? The narrative of shame sounds like I'm not enough. All of us have felt that way at some point or another. You're not deficient. You're not broken. You're human.
Good leadership goes beyond effectiveness to embrace authenticity and empathy. And today, we have the privilege of delving into the journey of Air Force Colonel Dede Halfhill, a revered leader with over 25 years of command experience. Described by Brené Brown as a total badass, Dede's impact spans pivotal roles from advising the Department of Defense's top leaders to commanding Air Force bases in Barksdale and Iraq. As a senior advisor to the U.S. Secretary of Defense and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, she's been a trusted influencer in crafting solutions to the military's most pressing challenges. Beyond her military service, Dede's commitment to leadership development shines through her role as a certified Dare to Lead facilitator and executive coach. Dede, I'm so honored to have you on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Oh, thank you, Danny. My pleasure. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. As our leaders begin tracking their walk with their Strava fitness app, I'd like to jump right in with our first question about leadership. There's a lot of different ways that leadership's defined, and along with misconceptions as well. Given your experience, how would you sum up what true leadership is?
You mentioned Brené in the introduction, so I'll actually just steal her definition because I think it's a great definition. It says, a leader is anyone who sees potential in people or a process and has the courage to develop that potential. And so I think that's a really good place to start, because what that really captures is that leadership isn't about a position. It's not about a role. It's really about the heart of the individual. Do I see potential in something? And do I believe I have the courage to help develop that potential? So I'm now a solopreneur. I have a business of one. I am still leading in some sense because I have to have a vision for that organization. I have to decide what are the good, that judgment decisions on where is a good place to go, where is not a good place to go. And I'm still working with people all day, every day. And so leading in a way in which helping navigate the conversations they're about to have. So I might not be leading a large organization. And I share that sometimes because I think we get caught up in leadership is about the position, or it's about the title, or it's about authority. And really, it is about having a vision for something and wanting to see that vision come forward.
It's really interesting that I want to take it back to where you had talked about seeing potential in somebody, right? Like, I can look back over my life, hindsight being 2020 and all, and see where leaders took that interest, and then seeing where I learned to take that interest, right? How do you go about recognizing the potential? Because I personally feel like so many people don't recognize their own potential.
Wow, that's a very profound statement, because I think you're exactly right. Sometimes we see so much potential in others and we are afraid of our own potential. We may think we have the capability to do something, but then there's a narrative in our head that tells us we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we're not the right person for it, somebody else would be better. And so we see that potential, but there is this negative naysayer who is telling you that potential is a false reality, that you're lying to yourself. And so you're right. I think to some degree, part of it is we see so much in others and we look at others with a really giving heart sometimes, not all the times. And then we look at ourselves with such judgment in a way that we don't always look at others, which means we have the ability to see so much potential in others, but that self-judgment kicks in and we may see it, but we definitely don't try to develop it.
That's so true. I think about that saying about, like, we see in others what we don't like in ourselves. And I wonder if it's true that we also see in others what we do like in ourselves or what we aspire to be. And that may be the potential that we're recognizing.
Yeah. It's really interesting. When I was on active duty, I would do an exercise with some of my young airmen. And it was usually like when we were in a group setting. And I would be there and I'd be, chatting with them after like delivering an award or something like that. And I would ask one individual, tell me three things that you do uniquely well for our Air Force. What are three gifts you uniquely contribute to our United States Air Force? And inevitably they would just look at me with like a deer in the headlights, right? Like I can't answer that. And they might begrudgingly give me one, and then I would just stand there very patiently and I would wait for number two. And number two, you could start to see people sweating, like they did not want to have to answer that question. And usually at that point, it was either between two and three or one and two. I would call them, I would say, I would ask the audience, who here can tell me something uniquely Danny contributes to our United States Air Force? And inevitably, somebody in the crowd, 100% of the time, would say, Danny is really good at this. Danny does a really great job with X. And Danny, if you were my airman, I would look at you and I would say, did you know that? And that person would say, no, I didn't know that's what others saw in me. And then I would say, well, why do you think that's what they see? And they would then say, well, I think I'm really good at that because of, I was raised this way, or I had this experience, or I learned it in this place. And so I would watch them come alive as other people showed them the gifts that are uniquely in them that they don't even see themselves. But it took somebody else seeing it for them to recognize and own it and to be able to say, wow, maybe I am really good at that thing. And it was so easy for me. I didn't even know I was really good at it. So it was always really like, to your whole point of potential. Sometimes our potential is the things we are so good at that we don't give ourselves credit for being that good at it. And so we dismiss it when really that is our gift. Like that's the thing we need to tap into.
That's such a good exercise and so hard to talk positively about ourselves. I mean, I could just imagine being asked that question. I was almost tempted to ask you that question about yourself right now to see what the natural response would be, right? I mean, my wife did something really nice for me the other week. We were coming back from a vacation and I lost a dear friend of mine. And so she knew that I was having a hard time attending his funeral because we were going to be separated. And so she made an online post and just asked people to share some love for me. And to your point, the response that was given filled me with such joy and surprise because I didn't know the people that would speak up. No clue what they would say and the words and the ways that I had impacted them. And one of my junior sailors from 15 years ago came up and really spoke life into me. And so like that's just such a beautiful, beautiful exercise because when I got out of the military, I didn't have that camaraderie for a long time. And so there was just so many different military incidences that shaped who I was as a, young 20 something, young 30 something year old man when I got out of the military that I was still hoping to strive for, and those lessons that I carried with me. And are there any moments that you carry with you from your career that continue to help shape who you are?
Yeah, I mean, it's, after spending 25 years and you now get the opportunity to reflect, like what were the most impactful moments of my career? And honestly, that exercise was one of them because it taught me, there's really two big moments, but that one taught me what happens when others see us and what it means to someone to be seen. And I would do that exercise with people sometimes, and I would get notes or emails afterwards from either the person who I had unfairly put on the spot. They would write me and they would say, like, they would actually say, thank you so much. I didn't know how others saw me, just to your point and the post. I didn't know how others saw me, and I didn't know the impact I was having. And it's just so nice to know that it might not be a huge impact, but it is an impact, and that matters. Right. And so I would get notes from people who I had put on the spot saying thank you. And I would get notes from people who had the opportunity to express their gratitude for someone
Hmm.
or express what someone does well. And it's interesting because that's all backed by research. I started that exercise because I had been listening to a podcast one morning and I had heard something about the research behind gratitude, not just the boost we get when we express gratitude ourselves, those days when we think about what am I grateful for, but we actually get a huge boost of connection and dopamine when we get to express gratitude for another. We get a hit of dopamine when someone expresses gratitude for something we're able to contribute. But here is the surprising part: people who witness gratitude being expressed also get a hit of dopamine.
What?
Yes, isn't it crazy? So I thought, here we are having this conversation, and the connection that is happening, not only from the person being recognized, the person recognizing someone's strengths, but everybody in that room, whether they knew it or not, was feeling a greater sense of connection to the organization in that moment, a greater sense of gratitude for the people in that moment. And so watching that exercise played out, and once it went well once, I did it everywhere I went because like I was enjoying it, they were enjoying it. It gave me a boost as a leader. I felt good. I felt it wasn't just me recognizing someone's greatness, it was their peers recognizing it. It was so much fun, and it almost became addictive, like a little bit of a high every time I got to do it. And so that was a big moment for me because I took that away with me really as a life lesson, not just a leadership lesson, because our most innate human need is to be seen, valued, and heard. And so how do we as individuals help others do that? How do we build more of that in our lives? So that was a big moment. I can share the second one with you if you want to, or we can move on to another question.
I absolutely have to hear the second one because that one is just so impactful. And I love that you led and exposed service members to that, because the community that we surround ourselves with is going to be reflective in who we are. And if you can bring positivity into a community, especially as a commander or a leader, then you're generally going to have a very positive command under you. Like everybody under you is going to feel more comfortable, going to feel more respected. And so like, thank you for that. I've got to hear the second one now, because like, if you're doing that for your community, what else are you bringing to the table?
Well, I think the second one was probably my biggest turning point as a leader. I was deployed to Iraq in 2010. And up to that point, I was trying to do everything the Air Force wanted me to do. I was trying to be the kind of leader they wanted me to be. I was trying to be the kind of officer they wanted me to be. I was so desperately trying to be the kind of public affairs officer they wanted me to be, the kind of commander I was supposed to be. And when I was in Iraq, I was commanding the Force Support Squadron at Balad Air Base. And the wing commander had come in, and he was a big proponent of CrossFit. And candidly, I had never done CrossFit before this, but he was, I don't know if you can tell now, but he was a big fan of CrossFit. And so he asked us to really retrofit the gym in a different way. And he wanted a bunch of CrossFit material in there. And he had really good reasons for loving CrossFit. He loved the community it built, that camaraderie. He loved how it pushed us. He loved how it gave you when you're good at it. And I can attest to this because I actually stayed with CrossFit for a few years into my tour into Hawaii. I love doing CrossFit there at the CrossFit box in Kailua. And so it gives you a real sense of confidence and swagger, which candidly I'd never really had in my life before that, right? I just really felt strong in my body. So I understood why CrossFit was so important. But admittedly, I was horrible at it, especially in the beginning. I wasn't the strongest person. I couldn't do pull ups. And every single day, his executive officer would be at the gym in the morning working out with us at the morning CrossFit class. And he would go back and tell the wing commander how many pull ups I had done that day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was pretty regularly asking me how was I progressing in CrossFit. And it just wasn't something I had a lot of confidence in. So he wasn't asking me how was I doing with managing 6 dining facilities that served 1,000 people. He wasn't asking me how I was managing transient, housing that housed 4,000 transient troops a day. He wasn't asking me how I was managing laundry for 25,000 people a day. He was asking me how was my CrossFit. And I thought, CrossFit isn't the thing I'm good at. And so I felt a lot of pressure. At the same time, there were a lot of other things going on in command that, I was learning, I was stumbling through. I wasn't doing as well as I would hoped. I wasn't engaging my team the way I thought I would. These two things are going to come together. And I'm at the gym one day and I'm about to lift. I'm about to try to do some squats. I think, what do you call that when you like squat rack it and push it up? I can't even remember the name of it now, but I'm doing this with just the bar because I'm a newbie, right? And so I'm doing it with just the bar. And I'm not even doing well with just the bar. And I look over and I see these two young officers, much younger than me, and they are doing amazing with a lot of weight on their bar. And I look at them and I think, here are these young officers kicking ass, and I suck. I'm over here and I can't even lift the bar. Who do I think I am? What am I doing here? I don't deserve to be here. I suck at everything. Like this bar is just one thing I suck at. I suck at connecting with my team. I suck at being able to manage the magnitude of supporting a base of 25,000. I suck at meeting the expectations of my leaders, and I just started beating myself up how much I sucked at all these things, and it was all being represented in this bar. This bar was just this moment where I realized I am a disgrace to the Air Force, is what I thought. I do not deserve to be in our United States Air Force. And I went back to my room and broke down a little. I started crying. I was having a really hard time getting myself together. And I called up a friend of mine who had commanded several times. And he gets on the phone, and I have now worked myself up so much with these stories of telling myself of how horrible I was and how much I didn't deserve to be there. And he gets on the phone, and all he hears is me crying. And it's that kind of crying where you're like, like I can't breathe. I'm so upset. All he knows is I'm in Iraq. And he picks up the phone, knows it's me calling from Iraq, and hears me uncontrollably crying, right?
Oh no.
And he right away starts panicking. Oh my God, Dede, what's wrong? Are you okay? Is everyone else okay? What's going on? Please just breathe, breathe. And he keeps telling me like to breathe. And all I can get out is I couldn't lift the bar. And he's like, what bar? Is it hurt? Like I couldn't bar. And these other girls, they could lift the bar. And finally he gets me to calm down. Like even today I get choked up about this. He finally gets me to calm down. And I explain to him what happened. And he says, well, first of all, with some strong cuss words, are you effing kidding me? Like, you had me terrified. I thought something was wrong. And he says, Dede, and if you are leading and if you are trying, every single one of us at some point on that journey feels like we're failing. Every single one of us has felt like a failure in leadership to a really significant degree. And I just sat there and I said, why did no one tell me that? Like, why did we not talk about the fact that this can be really hard? And the more senior you get, the bigger the problems are. And the more senior you get, the more isolated you feel. And the more senior you get, the more complexity and the more paradoxes you are navigating. There are no easy answers to any of this. And if there were, they wouldn't be problems at your level. And I was so mad that as a leader in a organization that prides themselves on building leaders, we had never had a conversation about how devastatingly lonely and unsuccessful it can feel to be leading, and how much I had beat myself up because no one had ever had that conversation with me. And so I decided this was a pivotal moment in my career because I decided then and there, I will never not share the hard moments of leadership because I don't want leaders to feel alone in that reality. Because it's a reality. If you are doing it and you're doing it well and you're taking chances and you're moving things forward and you're leading in places that haven't been led before, you're going to feel there are going to be days where you just feel like I'm the worst thing that's ever happened to the United States Air Force. But by talking about that, we normalize it. And by normalizing it, we lift the heaviness of it. We lift the emotional heaviness of the weight of that. And so that's kind of, I would say that's what started my journey into this space.
Yeah, those are such great words of wisdom, and I mean they still ring true. And it also just like it really highlights that need to share hard moments of life, like not just in leadership but of our lives. I mean, I remember thinking back to the reasons why I joined the military, and it wasn't because I wanted to learn who I was. It was because I saw family members doing it. I saw friends going in and I saw their lives changing for the positive. And, it's really highlighted in our current day and age when people are constantly posting the good things that are going on in their life, right? Like back when I joined, it was all the good things, but they didn't talk about their personal experience of struggles, how hard boot camp was for them, how hard it was to actually get through training, how they felt like they needed to continue to keep up, even though they were getting passed over for promotions or they were struggling with their PFT. It was all, I get to go to this part of the world. I get to serve this purpose. I'm serving my country. And so when you were coming into the Air Force and making this life-changing decision in the very beginning, who kind of led you there and what was your perception heading into the Air Force?
Oh, I had no clue what I was getting into, to be. My story is really bad. I joined the Air Force because I got a postcard in the mail one day, and so I am like all of the direct mail. I am a product of it. That's why they do it. And I really had no idea, to be really honest. I had no idea about the military. My dad was in the Navy Reserves, but he did his reserve duty 3 hours away from our home, so we never saw him in uniform. We never saw him really in that capacity. So I didn't have a huge understanding. All I knew is I couldn't go into the dining facility with no socks on. That's what I remember of my childhood and being around my dad on base. I can't go into the dining facility with no socks on. So when I got this postcard in the mail, I had no idea what it meant, but I was in college and I was like, I need a way to pay for college. I want to know I have a job when I'm done. And I remember calling, I first talked to an enlisted recruiter, but I didn't even know the difference between enlisted and officer. And the enlisted recruiter was wonderful, but I knew I couldn't leave school because I was the first one in my family to go to college. So I just knew I couldn't leave. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it, but I knew I couldn't leave. And so they put me in touch with an ROTC recruiter, and bless his heart, because like this goes to show you people can grow and change so much. This poor man. I was on the phone with him and he's telling me about field training and the physicality of it, right? The physical experience of field training. And I said to him, "Oh, so I'll like totally be in shape for bikini season." And he was like, "Yes, you will." I think about that now and I think about like who Dede Halfhill was when she joined the military and who I am after 25 years of people caring about me, people seeing in me what I didn't see in myself. 25 years of people giving me a chance to make mistakes, to stumble, to pick me up when I fell. I had so many people who pushed me because they saw something in me I didn't see in myself. But that push, I sometimes joke, like they kind of kick you in the butt and they're like, good luck, get in there, whether you think you can do it or not, right? But those moments taught me that I could. So the way my confidence was built, because, confidence comes from action, they would push, I'd have to deliver. And then 6 months into the job, I would say, oh, this isn't nearly as hard as I thought it was going to be. It's challenging. I'm growing, but it's not impossible. So 25 years of that, I am so grateful because I would not be the human I am today if not for the touch of the thousands of people we get the opportunity to interact with and care about and to be cared for by. I mean, it's amazing. I don't know that I was ever in shape for bikini season, but I definitely grew as an individual.
You know, and had you not been pushed the way that you were, had you not been able to lift that bar, you would have missed some valuable lessons. Had you not talked about it, had you not gone to the leadership training that you went to and had the experiences that you had in the Air Force, you wouldn't have the impact that you're currently having. And honestly, like it's no secret right now, as people know, Leanne thoroughly vets our guests. She vetted you. She also follows a lot of the same leaders as you, such as Brene Brown. She's a huge fan of hers. What turned you on to programs like Brene Brown's to start implementing kind of civilian leadership tactics into your military squadron commanders?
First, just a shout out to Renee, who can't be a fan, right? And like, who isn't a fan? She's amazing. I think what she does really well is she takes these truths that we all have seen but didn't have a language for, and she gives us a language to see the truth of who we are. And so, I just love that. But what I love even more is it's all backed by data. And I'm a big data person. I love, like, I like good detail. I like data. I want proof. I want science.
Yes, yes,
Uh,
yes.
it was so funny because I actually just got an email last night, early this morning. I saw it this morning when I woke up. And it was from a very senior leader who recently had the opportunity to hear Brene. And he just wrote me a note and said, "Hey, Brene was awesome. Thanks so much for turning us on to her." That was kind of the take of it, right? And I had to laugh because here we are, 2024. I first started talking about Brene's work, and not so much Brene, but the research that she has shared with us, her research, right? The research of what does vulnerability and shame look like for us as humans, and how does that show up in the way we engage others, in the way we share ourselves with the world, in the way we step into brave opportunities, the way we build courage. I started sharing her work with military leaders in 2014, 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. And candidly, I got a lot of, we don't talk about that here in the military. I got a lot of patronizing pats on the head, aren't you cute? No, we're not going to talk about vulnerability in the military. So to see that over the last 10 years, that has changed so much. And that we now are coming around, that military leaders are coming around to a place where they're allowing their own humanity to show up. And what that means as we allow for the humanity of those on our teams, what it means for leaders in the way we can help others navigate their struggles with mental health, their struggles with feelings of isolation, their struggles with the trauma that we all have experienced if you've served in the military anytime over the last couple decades. Having leaders who can hold space for that, who can create bumper rails for people's humanity of what's okay. To watch that transition has been so much fun. And I often hear from leaders who will still be frustrated, and I tell them individually, we still have pockets of people who maybe just haven't had the chance to learn the skills or haven't had the chance to practice the skills or have the conversation. But holistically, now being someone who has worked with all the services, I can tell you that it is growing. The sense that this is where leadership is moving toward is growing. And the sense that military leaders have to learn these skills is becoming more and more common. I will tell you, when I work in the corporate, I see an openness to it that surprised me, that corporate is much more aware of this need than I think we have been in the military, but that is shifting.
I definitely get to witness the shift as well, working closely with military and veterans. in that field and talking to leaders now in this space doing the work that we do. But I remember in the military, like there was just certain parts of your story that you didn't share, right? It was military bearing. It was you compartmentalized just about every aspect of your life. And that's really hard to do when you're on duty 365 24/7 and then deploying and asking your family also to be a part of that. And so while you're in, from what I understand, you had a chance to meet Brene and share your story with her. How did that impact you personally as well as professionally?
Honestly, it was probably one of the most terrifying things I did in my career. And I deployed twice to Iraq. It was terrifying because, like I said, I'd been talking about her research since about 2014 is when I really started deeply sharing it or openly sharing it. And I got so much pushback that when I met her and she asked if she could share that story in her book, um, I said yes, but I was also somewhat that old conditioning of, are you being the leader the Air Force wants you to be? Are you being the officer the Air Force wants you to be? And I too had that old story of, this isn't an emotional place. I have to be more stoic than emotional. I have to hide that humanity out of presence for the sake of presence and bearing, right? This whole idea of what is military bearing. Military bearing is not our humanity, is kind of the message we all received, right? It's that locked up, have it all together, don't smile. I mean, how many times have we seen pictures of people on the board, leaders, and none of them are smiling? And you're like, yeah, like smile, we're human. um and so when she asked to use that story in the book, I was a little terrified because I thought, this isn't just me talking to someone one-on-one. This is, anyone can read this story and anyone can judge me for my belief in emotion and how much we as leaders, it's a tool we should have. We should understand human emotion. If you are leading emotion, if you are leading humans, you should understand what makes humans tick, and it is emotion, right?
Yes,
And so
yes.
I was a little terrified. I was a little terrified when it came out. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody I was going to be in the book except for my public affairs chain. They knew. I didn't tell anybody else. But subsequently, 60 Minutes reached out and asked if I would be on their segment about Brene. And again, I told the lawyers, because I was working for the chairman at the time. So I told the chairman, I told the lawyers, and I told the public affairs chain. And again, didn't tell anybody else. My boyfriend was the only other human who knew I was going to be on 60 Minutes. I don't even think I told my mother. I was
Oh my
terrified.
gosh.
And so it aired. And when the segment ended, I don't think I have ever felt such a sense of relief, because the very first thought I had was, oh, they didn't make me out to be an emotional willy-nilly, right? Like, they still allowed me to stay in that space of professionalism, and I can show my face at work today, like, or tomorrow. Like, that's the very first thought I had is, oh, thank God I can still go to work tomorrow. And it was a huge moment where I realized, wow, the stories, even I, someone who has been immersed in her work for 7, 8 years at that point, who had been diligently studying and getting anything I could, even I still had a narrative of, it's binary. You're either emotional or you're professional. And I'm so grateful for that moment, because I had to do my own work around the fact that this isn't binary. The best leaders find a way to blend. The best leaders understand the nuance. The best leaders can navigate through both spaces in a way that allows us to allow for humanity at work, while also maintaining the things that we have to maintain when you are responsible for missions like we're responsible for, or you're responsible for the bottom line. And the truth is, they're not at odds with one another. They're actually incredibly complementary, but that's not what we've been taught. So even I had these really deep messages of, it's one or the other. So I was so grateful for that. And grateful that, it went as well as it did, because it gave me a chance to share a message on a much bigger scale that I'd wanted to share so much with the military, because I see so many people who are struggling. I saw so many people. The number of people who have come up to me after that, after reading the book or after watching that segment, is such a gift, because you realize even when you are scared to share a message, that message matters to someone. So share it.
That's such a beautiful sentiment and message to bring to people. And you really speak about the language of emotion and a lot of what you do. We're emotional people. We have these feelings. And a lot of the times what I've experienced is as I share my emotions or some of the hard stuff, a lot of people try to either empathize or fix the problem, right? But a lot of the times I just need to be heard. It's like, hey, I just need to know that I can get this out. You're not going to judge me. You're not going to try to fix me, because I don't need that portion. Just sometimes these things need to get out. And if you turn around and look at what warriors throughout the centuries have done, is they've written about their experiences. There's extensive journals taken by some of the generals during the Civil War and Revolutionary War and all throughout that talk about how they're feeling, and they're reflective. They're very, very reflective on the day that they just had or the troops that they just led, and they're sharing that with everybody. But somewhere along the lines, we've lost that, and we can start to see the mental health of the everyday service member start to drop, and then it affects them as veterans because they continue to hide that. They're no longer reflective because they have to hide their emotions. And so how do you think military leaders in today's age can start to better address and support these mental health issues that we're seeing in the modern times?
Wow. I mean, it's such a big question, but I think probably the first step is you have to learn to address your own. And if you can't do that reflection, if you can't navigate the own parts of you that feel hard, then you'll never be able to help others. So if you want to be a leader who can really help people, you have to first help yourself. It's interesting. I got my coaching certification in 2014. And as part of the application process, you had to share a moment of real growth. You had to share a moment of struggle. I can't remember how they asked the question. And I've over time realized the reason they ask you that question is because you can't expect to be a coach who can help someone through a hard moment, through growth, through practice, through struggle, if you yourself haven't gone through those things, if you yourself aren't also going through them to some degree, because we should all be growing and learning. So for leaders who want to be able to help others through their emotional space, do the work of helping yourself, because when you do, you will realize just how hard it is. And just like you said, when you do the work yourself, you'll realize what's helpful and what's not. Sometimes people just want to be heard. They're not looking for an answer. But if you haven't done the work, then your first approach is probably to fix versus just be.
Yeah, that's great advice to people. Work on yourself first, because then you can start to recognize what needs to be done in order to help others moving forward. Unfortunately, some of the things, even for those of us that have gone through the healing process, sometimes we forget that it's a continuous process. We're going to experience new hurts, new things that bring us down. And I, for one, for a long time, when I still struggled with thoughts of self-harm, I thought it was because I was failing, and I would be ashamed to share when they got specifically bad until I overcame them. It wasn't until I learned to share it in the moment that I started to actually overcome those feelings, and release the power that those emotions had over me. Unfortunately, so many people can't work past the shame. They don't have the resilience to push through the shame. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that impact? Because I know there's a lot of research around shame and shame resilience. Could you share kind of from the research based side and current statistics on shame, the impact that shame has on a person's life?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to the story I told about being in my room and breaking down over being a horrible leader when my friend said all of us feel that. That's the truth about shame. Like everyone has it. And I think part of the disconnect is we hear a word like shame and it feels so heavy and it feels so judgmental, and we don't want to talk about it. So everyone has it. No one wants to talk about it is something we talk about in the Dare to Lead program. What really helped me was when I really understood what the narrative of shame sounds like. And Brene shares in her work that the narrative of shame sounds like I'm not enough and I'm not good enough. And so I want you to think about what are all the times we have told ourselves, I'm not enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not experienced enough. I'm not fast enough. I'm not manly enough. I'm not feminine enough. Whatever. When I was lifting the bar, right? Like I'm not strong enough and I'm not strong enough equates to I suck. So like that shame message is as simple as I'm not enough, or as we teach in the Dare to Lead program, who do you think you are? Like, who do you think you are to be leading a podcast? Who do you think you are to be the one taking command of this organization? Like, who do you think you are to share your idea? So, when you think about shame from that perspective, I think all of us can think about how often that narrative shows up. It could be for work, it could be in our home lives, it could be in our parenting, it could be in our relationships. It's everywhere. And candidly, society, social media doesn't help because there are very, very strong messages coming at us all the time, especially gendered messages around masculinity and femininity and what those mean. And so it goes back to, again, why aren't we talking about this? If all of us have it, none of us want to talk about it. The more we talk about it, the more we normalize it. The more we normalize it, the less it has a hold on us. And so that looks like I want to do a podcast, but I tell myself, no one wants to hear what you have to say. No one wants to hear the questions you ask. So who do you think you are to do this? And I don't. And I miss an opportunity to give back to the world in a way that I might be uniquely good at. It goes back to the very first story. What are those things you're uniquely good at? And is there a narrative of I'm not good enough that is keeping you from sharing that thing you are uniquely good at? And so it stops us in our tracks. And here's the thing that sucks about shame. I mean, just royally sucks, is that you can know it. You can know how it shows up in your life. You can know the things that trigger it. And shame resilience doesn't mean it goes away. Shame resilience means I know the process to work through it faster so that it lessens its hold on me and it doesn't hang out as long. And maybe I build skills and tools to get through it faster. Another way to think about shame is what are all of the things you see yourself as? And someone shared with me once, you just get off stage. What are the things you hope you overhear a conversation that hurts you? What are they saying? For me, I have a lot of shame around intelligence. And so for me, it would be like, oh my God, she's so stupid. Oh my gosh, she's not saying anything that anyone hasn't already said. Oh my gosh, she was a horrible speaker, you know? So like shame shows up in the ways we see ourselves and fear that someone else is going to see us in a way we don't want to be seen.
I have so many thoughts that are running through my head because as I'm hearing you, I'm recalling moments in my life. I'm recalling moments that I've witnessed in the lives of service members. You know, there's a mentality, especially within a lot of service members, that if you're not perfect, you're failing. And like perfection is never something that can actually be obtained. At least there's moments of perfection. You know, you can get that perfect PFT score, but the moment that you don't hit that 300 score, if you're a Marine or whatever it is for the Navy, you're ridiculed, and your peers talk about you in such a negative way. And now with the online presence of everybody, I am almost certain your comment section is probably one of the most hostile places that you've ever experienced, because we have that whenever we talk about military mental health and the importance. I get ridiculed for my ideas of talking positively to people. And if we're not talking about these things and we're not identifying ourselves as people that are well intentioned or people that are healthy, that just have this thing, I know for a long time I would not share the thoughts of my self-harm and suicidal ideations because I felt like I was supposed to have already overcome them. And when you had said, like, it's not that we overcome our thoughts or this or these negative experiences, it's that we learn how to deal with them regularly and more efficiently as we go through. And so I know a lot of service members, first responders, and veterans currently struggle with ideas of shame, things that they feel like they just can't share or they just can't overcome. And unfortunately, it brings them to the grave. So with that in mind, what message of hope do you have for those that are currently battling?
Gosh, just like my friend said to me, you're not alone. You're not the only one who feels this way. All of us have felt that way at some point or another. You're not deficient. You're not broken. You're human. And like you said, Danny, sometimes you just want to be heard. And I think I would tell people there are so many of us that want to be here to hear you. And there are so many of us that want you to be here to be heard. And it's hard to reach out because when you're in that space, it feels so heavy. It feels almost impossible to share your story one more time, to reach out. But I think both of us can speak from experience that even though you find yourself in some really dark places, if you allow it, it can be fleeting. If you talk to someone and get help, things can get so much better. And it might mean we have to make some hard decisions, and it might mean we have to change certain things in our lives, but you can do it. And the life on the other side of that is so amazing if you allow it to be. I don't want to diminish how hard it is because I know it's hard. But what this work has taught me and what Brene shares in her program is that shame can't survive being met with empathy. But we're really bad at empathy, and that's the problem. So often, shame is met with fixing, shame is met with judgment, shame is met with trying to say, like, everything's going to be fine, just like I was actually kind of just doing, right? Like, it's all going to be good on the other side. But when we can share our stories and someone says to us, I get it, I'm there with you, and I'm here with you now. We have to teach people the real skills of empathy so that when we have people who are struggling and reaching out for help, we know how to be the kind of support they actually need. And that's, I think, where we're lacking. So I would tell you, I would say to someone, keep trying until you find that person. And understand that a lot of people don't have that skill the right way, but keep going because eventually somebody will.
It's so important to keep going. Thank you so much for that message, Dede. If people want to continue to learn from you, hear from you, or connect with you, how can they go about doing so?
Well, they can follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram. I also have a website, dedehalfhill.com. But honestly, like, just reach out and connect. I love chatting with people in the DMs and hearing people's story. But yeah, LinkedIn and Instagram are the best places right now.
Excellent. Well, Dede, we truly appreciate your time here. Thank you so much for joining me on the 1 Mile, One Veteran podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful conversation, and thank you for what you're doing.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, remember, you can also catch the 1 Mile, One Veteran podcast on Reese Across America Radio, ready for you on platforms like iHeartRadio, Odyssey, and the TuneIn app.